With Metroid Prime 4 finally dropping in just about a week and fans already debating what might go wrong, I wanted to take a step back and look at the entire series from the beginning. Every Metroid game has at least one major flaw, even the masterpieces, so today we're breaking down the biggest issues each entry faces. And at the very end, I'll go over the early concerns people have about Prime 4 and whether they're actually worth worrying about. The original Metroid is undeniably important, but it hasn't aged gracefully. Its most glaring flaw is the overuse of identical looking rooms and corridors, which combined with a lack of any in-game map makes navigation extremely confusing. In an era before digital maps, players had to rely on memory or sketch out their own maps or use the map that came with it, but still, it's a lot more tedious and difficult than what we have now. Many areas look virtually the same with no visual landmarks. As a result, it's easy to wander in circles and get lost. Not in the fun exploratory way, but in a frustrating where the heck am I kind of way. Fans recall that most corridors and rooms look nearly identical, and Nintendo should have developed a landmark or something to differentiate areas. Like, I know it's the NES, but just because it's on old hardware doesn't mean it's not a flaw. And there's a lot of other issues here, like the physics feel pretty off today, and there's plenty of other gameplay quirks. Just makes this a very rough play today. Remember, this game has like no save feature. It just relies on long passwords, and enemy respawns are brutally unforgiving. And it's not that this game is all bad, because we got Metroid Zero Mission, which was a remake of this, and it basically took the vision here, but fully utilized better hardware. Like, this game did kind of start the Metroidvania genre, but once again, since it's on old hardware, we can't just say all is forgiven because it was on the NES. We have to look at it from, what is it like to play this now? Metroid 2 expanded the series' lore and introduced a lot of key story elements and evolutions of the Metroids, but it was shackled by the Game Boy's limitations. The biggest flaw, in my opinion, is the crude visual presentation. With the monochrome screen, almost every cave on planet SR388 looks the same. There's no in-game map and no background detail, just a black void beyond the platforms, so it's very easy to get disoriented. Without distinct landmarks or colors, players often wander aimlessly, unsure if they've been to a location before. Critics at the time praised the idea and the story of Metroid 2, but even the graphics and audio were criticized then. The world feels visually empty compared to other Metroid games, which undercuts the atmosphere, and these are a lot of the same issues as the original Metroid, but at least that was in color. And there's plenty of other issues here, like the audio and gameplay in Metroid 2 suffer from the hardware. Most of the soundtrack is eerie ambient noise rather than memorable music. And some people actually do like that, but for me, I like to have some more music. Samus's controls are once again clunky here, the field of view is very zoomed in due to the small screen, her movement is floaty again, and the space jump ability is notoriously finicky to perform. Combat becomes repetitive as well, like you hunt Metroids in a pretty formulaic loop. You ultimately have to exterminate around like 40 Metroids in total, and aside from a few boss-like evolutions, most of those fights play out in similar fashion. And with the monochrome graphics, even finding hidden items can feel like a random just bomb the ground and hope, since there's just very few visual clues. Really, Metroid 2 just has a lot of the same issues as the original, but some of them are far worse here. Super Metroid is often hailed as a masterpiece, and rightfully so, but one aspect that shows its age is the control feel. Samus's movement in this game has a slight floatiness to it. She doesn't stop on a dime, and her jumps have a subtle drift. Definitely a lot better than the previous two games, but if you've played the more modern games with the snappier controls, like not even just Dread, but Zero Mission or Fusion, going back to Super Metroid can feel a little bit imprecise. This becomes apparent when attempting advanced techniques that the game barely explains. The wall jump, for example, has a very specific timing and requires an awkward button press. You have to press away from the wall at just the right moment before jumping. Many players struggle with it until they master the quirks of it, and even then it's easy to mess up. Another control quirk is the old-fashioned button layout. Super Metroid requires you to cycle through weapon types like the missiles, super missiles, etc. with a single button, and to hold another button to run, and yet another to aim diagonally. Trying to run, aim, and shoot simultaneously can feel like really annoying on the SNES controller. Later games have streamlined this, and it just makes it play a lot better. None of this ruins Super Metroid, like its atmosphere, level design, bosses, like they're all phenomenal. Like this is one of the best games of all time in my opinion. But a lot of these flaws just come down to stuff outside the actual gameplay. Even if you haven't played Super Metroid, I don't want to scare you off from this game. Like when I first played Super Metroid a few years ago, it was definitely noticeable at first, but you do get used to it. And honestly, that says a lot about this game that even after 30 years, really the only big issues I can find with it are just some annoyances with the controls. Metroid Fusion took a more narrative-driven horror kind of approach, but it came at the cost of the series' trademark open exploration. Fusion is highly linear, and Samus is effectively guided by a commanding computer. So this quote-unquote computer locks doors behind you and highlights navigation points on your map, just constantly tells you where to go next. Essentially, you move from mission to mission in a set order, exploring discrete sectors of the space station one at a time. While this still makes for a great experience, like the developers still did a great job with this, you don't really get to wander off the beaten path as much. Like the feeling of freedom and discovery is diminished because the game's always guiding you. Even back when it released, some critics and fans took issue with this lack of openness. It is often cited as Fusion's biggest flaw, and I think I got to agree with that. You can't really sequence break as much in this, or explore areas out of order. If you see an area you might want to go to early on, it's probably inaccessible until the story permits it. And as a result, Fusion is sometimes described as a great action game, but a slightly off-formula Metroid. It has a great story, some legitimately scary moments, even given the hardware, but it also locks you into its script. In the end, Fusion still is an excellent game. It's just one that trades some exploration freedom for a more guided, story-heavy style. I can still enjoy a game like this and a game more open like Super Metroid. And it's kind of like with Zelda and Skyward Sword. Like Skyward Sword's a very good game for what you're getting, but a lot of people were upset that it didn't have the openness of other Zeldas. Metroid Prime made a stunning jump to 3D, but even this classic has one section that fans consistently gripe about, and that's the Chozo artifact hunt right before the final act. In order to access the last area and boss, the game suddenly tasks you with finding 12 Chozo artifacts hidden around the world. It's essentially a scavenger hunt or a fetch quest, but by the time this is introduced, most players already just want to get to the finale. Like, this is considered one of the best games of all time. Like the campaign of this is just so fun, just nearly flawless, but this is just kind of seems like padding, and it kind of brings down the game at the end a little bit. The artifact quest itself isn't poorly designed per se. The game provides cryptic clues for each artifact's location, and some are cleverly hidden, but making it a mandatory collection feels just kind of arbitrary. If you haven't been collecting them along the way, it means a lot of retreading old areas purely to fetch these items, rather than uncovering a lot of new content. A lot of people just found it to be a momentum killer on their first playthrough, and even in Metroid Prime Remastered, the segment was pointed out as just the one part that still just doesn't feel right in the game. And it is telling that this fetch quest is almost always mentioned as Prime's lone flaw, because otherwise this game is incredibly well paced. Like in a series where backtracking is usually organic and rewarding, Prime's endgame key hunt just sticks out a lot more than it should. But again, this is one part of the game. I know not even everyone hates this. It's not that it's poorly designed like I mentioned, but it definitely was an issue for pacing for me, but very, very far from the worst thing in this video. Metroid Zero Mission is a superb remake of the original Metroid, but its biggest drawback is that it's over almost as soon as it starts. The game is very short, like many players finish it under 5 hours or so, and experienced players can blow through it in like 2 to 3 hours. Along with that comes a relatively low difficulty level. Samus controls so smoothly and just feels so much more powerful here, especially with upgrades and with save points, and there's few points in this game that truly test you. Zero Mission is packed with improvements and even adds a neat post-game stealth sequence, but it's still a condensed adventure. You're guided by Chozo statues that mark your next destination, so you rarely get lost or stuck here. Health and missile pickups are generous, and bosses tend to have straightforward patterns, and even the new Zero Suit Samus segment, where you're temporarily weaker and weaponless, is short-lived and not overly punishing. As a result, comparing this to like Super Metroid or even Metroid Fusion, Zero Mission doesn't quite satisfy in terms of challenge or content. It's often recommended as a perfect entry point for newcomers, and I totally agree with that. But if you're a veteran Metroid player, first of all, you've probably already played this, but if for some reason you haven't, you're probably not going to have too much difficulty with this, but it's still a fantastic game. Like, this is a remake of the original, and it fully realized what that game could have been, obviously with better hardware on the Game Boy Advance. And while I personally see this as a flaw, like I would like the game to be a little longer, a little more of a challenge, it is purposely designed this way. Like, it's meant to be a more streamlined game, I guess. And for what it is, like, this is a top 5 Metroid game in my opinion. Like, even with the short length, even with the difficulty, it's just so greatly designed. It really overshadows those issues. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes is remembered for upping the difficulty and doubling down an atmosphere, but its dual-world mechanic introduced a divisive flaw. Echoes make you juggle between Light Aether and a toxic mirror version, Dark Aether, where the very air hurts you. Like, in Dark Aether, Samus's health continuously drains until you stand in special safe zones bathed in light. This mechanic is novel, and it definitely adds some tension. The first time you dash from one light bubble to the next, just watching your energy bar get lower, like, it definitely does add to the feel of the game. However, a lot of times it can be more stressful and fun. Like, exploring Dark Aether often often feels like a slog is you're essentially just watching your health bar the whole time and just pausing in safe spots to recharge. Like, I get this if it's like a small section, but this was a lot of the game. And you know what, you may like this, you may think that this just adds like a cool level of difficulty. Like, I know I was complaining about Metroid Zero mission being a little too easy, and now I'm saying this is a little too difficult, and it's not exactly that. It's not that it's ridiculously difficult or anything, it's just kind of annoying in my opinion. But by the end of the game, Samus' light suit negates the damage, so it isn't like it's throughout the entire game, but I digress. Another issue I do want to talk about is that Echoes doubles down on key hunts. Each main area requires finding 3 keys in Dark Aether to unlock the boss, effectively making you do mini fetch quests in every region. Combined with the slow, methodical movement in the Dark World, these tasks can feel like padding once again. Backtracking through mirrored layouts, managing limited dark, light beam ammo, and enduring the health draining environment made Echoes feel a lot more punishing than rewarding at points. And to be fair, a lot of people do appreciate Echoes for its oppressive atmosphere and the tougher puzzles, but for me personally, it is what brought Echoes down a little bit for me. This is still probably my 6th favorite Metroid game, something like that. Like, it's borderline top 5, but these flaws definitely did stand out to me at least. When I said I would cover every Metroid game, I meant I would cover every Metroid game, because here's Metroid Prime Pinball. So the biggest flaw in this is basically that's just kind of a shallow game. Like, it's a fun novelty. It's not meant to be taken too seriously. It's a simple pinball game. So I don't even want to really say that there's like a major flaw that just brings this game down so much. Like, I don't think there's much replay value here. I think this is a game you can play for like a short play session and then just be done with. Like, now if you want to get this game, it costs how much? So yeah, for that price, I don't know if this is worth it, because this is just a very simple game. Prime Hunters was an impressive showcase for the Nintendo DS. Like, it was a true 3D Metroid style shooter with online multiplayer, but its single player adventure mode had a very clear flaw. It was just very repetitive. The game doesn't have the rich variety of bosses or environments that other Metroids do. Instead, you end up fighting the same 2 boss creatures over and over in slightly different forms, and by the time you reach the end, you faced each boss multiple times, and it just feels like padding. Once again, I know I've used that word a few times in this video. The level design also has you revisiting the same planets and areas repeatedly, each time with modest changes or just new sections unlocked, and it can start to wear out player like after just going back to these levels a lot. The structure of Hunter's campaign reinforces this repetition. Like, on each planet you collect an artifact, and then a timer triggers an escape sequence, then you move on to the next area, only to later backtrack for more artifacts. Even the encounters with rival bounty hunters are reused, and the same characters ambush you in identical scenarios in multiple locations. It's unfortunate because the hunters themselves have unique weapons and personalities, but the campaign doesn't use them beyond those ambushes. Without a constantly evolving set of challenges, the single player can feel like going through the motions, which is disappointing in a Metroid game. The multiplayer was the real focus of Hunters, and I really wish I got to play it. Like I can't really speak on any of the issues for the multiplayer since I've never played it myself, but obviously since it's a DS game, the online servers are long gone. Hunters is a very unique game. Like, it's a very impressive game for the hardware, but I don't think it holds up particularly well in 2025. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption tries to broaden the series' appeal with cinematic set pieces, voice-acted characters, and the Wii's motion controls, which I personally think work great for aiming. I know some people have that as an issue, but in doing so, it adopted a more linear, mission-based structure that some fans see as its biggest flaw. Unlike the sprawling, interconnected worlds of Prime 1, Prime 3 is divided into distinct planets and space stations you visit via your gunship. Each location, whether it's Norian, Elysia, the pirate homeworld, like wherever it is, it's its own contained map. And while you can revisit them, the progression is more guided and more level-like than the continuous exploration of previous games. You often receive direct objectives from NPCs or your ship's computer, and early on there's even a guided sequence with fellow Federation soldiers around. For instance, the prologue mission on the Norian station has Samus fighting alongside Marines in a scripted battle. It's just very different from the isolated openings of prior Metroid titles. This means that the game tends to lock you into a set path. Finishing one area's objectives and move on to the next. Backtracking for secrets is still possible, but usually only after the story brings you back. The end result is a game that is excellent and polished, yet just like with Fusion, it's a lot more linear, and for a lot of fans, including myself, like, I like the more open style, even though I can still really appreciate this gameplay. Now also, I don't want to act like this is all bad, because I can appreciate Corruption's faster pace and rarely getting stuck, because even though I don't always mind getting stuck because it is a Metroid game, it definitely can get a little frustrating sometimes, so it's not the worst thing in the world, and the narrative has more momentum than a lot of other games, but it also kind of lost the series' signature feeling of the solitary exploration. Like, that sense of being dropped into an alien world with minimal direction, pretty much one of the biggest themes of Metroid, and Corruption softens that by comparison. You'll see a lot of people call this like streamline or handholdy, and that's not entirely false, but it's still a fantastic game by just any measure. And after Corruption, there was obviously the dark age of Metroid, where there was Federation Force, there was Other M, but since then we've definitely went in the right direction in my opinion, or at least we have, but we have to see where Metroid Prime 4 is going. And now next up is the game I just talked about, Metroid Other M. So there's a ton of things you could have as the biggest flaw here. Like, you could talk about some of the gameplay issues, you could talk about like going from first person to third person, but I think the biggest flaw is just a lot of the narrative decisions, particularly how it portrays Samus. Team Ninja's attempt at a cinematic Metroid game gave us a Samus who, for the first time, had extensive voiceover monologues and a scripted character arc, and it just completely contradicted the Samus that we've grown to know over the entire series. Biggest flaw of Other M is that it just undermines her character. It just depicts her like a shell of her former self. Like, instead of just being like the stoic independent bounty hunter from previous games, she's just completely different here. Prime example is the bizarre authorization concept where like Samus enters the battle ship with all her gear intact but refuses to use most of her abilities until her former commanding officer Adam Malkovich gives her permission. This just leads to nonsensical moments, and the most notorious being suffering heat damage in a lava area because Adam hadn't authorized the Varia suit yet, even though she had it available. Instead of the usual explanation like Samus losing her power-ups in an accident, Other M asks us to accept that she chose just not to use them until told. This is just a plot point widely ridiculed for making no sense at all, just being completely baffling and basically a character assassination on Samus. Like, even if you could look past these, and you might say, well, if you just ignore the reasonings, like, the gameplay would be the same either way, like, you would still wouldn't have the items yet until you unlock them. And yeah, but it really just takes you out of the immersion. Like, it just really ruins the atmosphere here. And then something else I want to talk about is just Samus's encounter with Ridley. Despite having defeated Ridley multiple times in the series, here Samus has a post-traumatic breakdown, she freezes in fear, reliving trauma, and is just unable to fight till a fellow soldier snaps her out of it. Like, what was this? What were the developers thinking here? Samus had never shown any vulnerability like this in face of Ridley before, and while exploring a hero's trauma isn't inherently bad, Other M handled it just so clumsily. And I mean, I guess this game's technically canon, so we can just try to ignore it, but we cannot fully ignore that this game exists. And this game isn't all bad. It has some positives. If you want to hear me talk more about it, you can check out my Metroid ranking. But beyond that, there's other issues like I mentioned, like the first to third person combat. Like, on paper it's interesting, but it just felt really clunky. Like, it kind of felt like it tried to combine aspects of Metroid Prime and then more aspects of the 2D games, and at times it's alright, but it just never feels like it really made sense. Like, it just didn't mesh together super well. I still think this game is worth playing if you're a huge Metroid fan, because I think it does get overhated a little bit, but it's still not a very good game. And speaking of games that are not very good, Federation Force is a spinoff that took the Metroid name in a very, very different direction, and that's exactly why it received such a cold reception. It's not that the game is utterly unplayable. In fact, as a co-op sci-fi shooter, it can have some decent moments. The problem is that it just breaks the formula of what a Metroid game is expected to be. Instead of playing as Samus exploring an alien world alone, you control chibi-style Federation Marines completing missions as a squad. Levels are selected from a menu, objectives are things like defending bases or retrieving items, and you're just constantly chatting with or relying on other soldiers. Instead of a continuous world to explore, the game is just broken into short missions, and there's no sense of a cohesive journey, and any sense of solitude or mystery or exploration is just completely gone here. And I know that's not really what this game was going for, but we still gotta talk about it. And then the timing of Federation Force just only amplified the negativity. It came out after a 5 or 6 year drought of core Metroid games, like since Other M, which we just talked about, and obviously the reception of that wasn't very good. So fans were very desperate for a traditional Metroid, and then when we got the announcement of this, it just kind of made people think the series was dead. Like, this was around the time when we got Hey Pikmin, Chibi Robo Ziplash, and they were just dumbed down versions of beloved series on the 3DS, and a lot of people thought this might have been it for the Metroid series. Fortunately though, just the next year we got a great remake of Metroid 2, so I think people are able to look at this less emotionally nowadays, like take out just the reception of it and look at it as a game itself. And I've seen a lot of people just say this game is overhated, and like with Other M, that might be true, but I still don't think, even taking out context, it's a very good game. Like, it's not a game I'd really want to go back to. Samus Returns is a modern remake of Metroid 2 and brought some new mechanics to the classic formula, most notably the melee counter, which was a time parry move. It's smack an enemy that's about to attack, leaving it open to a follow-up blast. It's a satisfying feature in moderation, but I feel like Samus Returns leans on it far too much. Nearly every common enemy was designed to lunge at Samus, like practically begging you to counter. The optimal way to handle fights becomes just waiting for the enemy to charge, expecting the parry, and then shooting the stunned creature. Dozens of encounters play out exactly the same, which gets old really fast. While the counter makes you feel powerful at first, and nailing the timing is pretty cool, using it constantly ends up just breaking the flow of exploration. Instead of running and gunning through these caverns, you're stopping every few steps to engage in a quick-time event-style smackdown. The heavy emphasis on the counter also means if you try to ignore it and just blast enemies normally, you're in for a rough time. Monsters in Samus Returns are damage sponges unless you counter them, so the game strongly incentivizes the parry repeat cycle. It's telling that the next 2D entry, Metroid Dread, dialed this back. Dread kept the melee counter but made enemies weaker and less reliant on that one mechanic, allowing players to deal with these threats in different ways. I think having a counter system is good, but I don't want to have to use it every time. And aside from the counter overuse, Samus Returns is a great remake. It adds new boss fights, areas, abilities, but it still shares some of the issues of the original Metroid 2. Still definitely think this is worth playing, but if you don't want to play this, there's another Metroid 2 remake, and I'm not going to cover that in this video since it's not an official Metroid game, but honestly you can't really go wrong with either of these. They're both great games. And now here we are at the most recent Metroid game, at least for now. Metroid Dread was highly acclaimed, yet some players felt that the Emmy robot encounters, while innovative, were a mixed blessing that disrupted the game's pacing. Emmys are nearly indestructible robots that stalk you in confined zones. This concept expands on the Fusion idea of an SAX unstoppable Samus doppelganger, but by making it an active gameplay mechanic, these encounters turn those sections into tense survival horror stealth sequences. The first few times it's a thrilling challenge. This is actually something I didn't expect when playing Dread. It's a different feeling than a lot of Metroid games, where you want to be more stealthy instead of just going like guns blazing. And if one of the enemies catches you, it's pretty much an instant game over unless you just pull off a very, very difficult timing based counter. Dying to an enemy isn't too punishing since the game restarts you right outside the zone, but that also encourages a trial and error approach. You might die repeatedly as you figure out the path or the tactic needed to bypass or destroy the robot. After a while, with 7 enemies to defeat in total, the pattern becomes predictable. You evade it until you find the temporary Omega Blaster upgrade, then you destroy the Emmy and move on. Now, I do actually like this concept. I think it plays up fairly well here, but it definitely does start to get a little repetitive after a while. Like the pacing definitely could be a little better here. Outside of those zones, Dread is fast. It's a very fluid Metroid adventure with challenging boss fights, smooth exploration, the best controls we've ever seen in the series, but the game definitely does slow down in these sections after a while. Some people really like the stealth portions, and I like it to a degree. Like this is probably my favorite 2D Metroid. It's very close with Super Metroid, and I don't think this was a huge flaw or anything but I think this is a game that has very, very few flaws, which is why I'm saying this is the biggest issue. And I just want to clarify that in this video. Just because I'm saying something might be the game's biggest flaw, it could be because the game just has very few flaws at all, and there may be something that I just thought for me brought the experience down a little bit, but it doesn't necessarily mean I hate it. It doesn't mean it's objectively the worst thing, so just keep that in mind. And now let's talk about Metroid Prime 4. So I'm recording this on November 22nd, so we're about 2 weeks away from when this is coming out. When this video comes out, it'll probably be like a week away. And there's a lot of concerns with Prime 4. The game was announced in 2017, and that's 8 years ago, so it's been in development hell. Like the game has pretty much been restarted, like in development. So there definitely are concerns. In a recent gameplay showcase, we saw a new character named Miles McKenzie, and people do not like him. He's basically like a comedic sidekick, like the type of guy to like say, he's right behind me, isn't he? And then a Metroid just attacks him. That's the kind of character we're dealing with here. We don't know how much he's going to be in this game. We don't know if he's in one section and that's it. We don't know if he's going to be there the whole game. But that does not feel like Metroid, having just a companion with you the whole time, especially one who doesn't even take himself seriously. Like I feel like there's going to be a part where he says, there's 4 Metroids beyond there.
Say that again?
And then he's gonna like look at the camera. Another one is excessive hand-holding and linear design again. So Nintendo has been doing this for a while now, where they're making games a lot more accessible. They're making them, I don't want to say exactly dumbed down, but they're kind of dumbing down some games, like especially like the recent Fire Emblem games are very different from the originals because it just gets more people to play. It makes it easier for a bigger audience to play this. So that's a big concern. And then another concern, I don't think this would be the biggest flaw, but this is going to be a Switch game that it also has a Switch 2 version, so the Switch could hold it back a little bit from its full potential, and I just thought that's worth noticing. Maybe none of these are even issues in the game, but those are just some concerns that I did want to talk about. Maybe I'll redo this once Metroid Prime 4 actually comes out. But anyway, that's what I think the biggest flaw in every Metroid game is. If you comment and you think I'm wrong, I just want to hear like your reasoning. Like I don't need you to even prove it to me like why something might be the biggest flaw, but I just want to hear with your personal experience with each game, what do you think held the game back the most? And if you enjoyed this video, I have a Metroid ranking I think you'll enjoy, so go check that out. And consider subscribing and liking as it really helps me out. I really do love Metroid. I haven't covered it in too many videos, but if this video does well, I'd definitely love to hear some of your ideas for more Metroid content. If you want to give me any ideas, you can join my Discord as well. And thank you for watching Domainy, and I'll see you next time.